The beautiful thing about psychedelics is they teach both of those paradoxes. They teach both the paradox of how to surrender and how to let go and how to just be with things that come up, but also how to direct that energy towards a creative outcome that you think would be beneficial both for you and for the broader collective, right? So there has to be equal emphasis on both what's great for me and myself and my family, but also what's great for people at large and kind of the contribution that I'm making.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Wendy Myers. Welcome to the Myers Detox Podcast. And today we're going to be talking about psychedelics, psilocybin, and using that for personal and professional development and answering a lot of the questions you have about this and certainly satisfying your curiosity. I think it's really fascinating. You know, I've done psilocybin myself, microdosing, and just found it really, really interesting, very opening, elevating your mood, giving you tons of energy. And I know many people who've been helped tremendously with psilocybin and psychedelics. So I wanted to have one of the world's experts on psilocybin come on the show. His name is Paul Austin, and he's got millions to safe and meaningful psychedelic experiences through his work as the founder of Third Wave. He's been featured in Forbes, Rolling Stone, BBC's Work Life. He's pioneered the convergence of psychedelics, personal transformation, and professional success. And Paul empowers leaders, creatives, and pioneers to leverage psychedelics for both personal and professional growth. He's authored the book Mastering Microdosing, transformative resource for leaders, creatives, and healers. And Paul's training program, Psychedelic Coaching Institute, caters to individuals who seek to integrate their psychedelic experiences into their business practices. And you can use code Wendy to get $500 off that program. And you can learn more about Paul's work at paulaustin.co and microdosing psychedelics for therapeutic use at thethirdwave.co. So, Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on the podcast, Wendy. I'm glad we figured out our technical difficulties and got to kick off.
Always fun, those tech issues. Aren't we in Mercury retrograde right now?
Probably. I feel like we're always in Mercury retrograde.
Yeah, and there are like 5 planets aligning right now.
Something, and we had an eclipse. Maybe that has an impact.
Yeah. And so I'm actually in Texas. I'm right into the path right here.
Totality.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? You're very much into psychedelics. So why do you tell us about that and how you kind of, got into this foray?
So my story starts in Michigan. I grew up in a small suburb outside Grand Rapids, which is known for its furniture and now beer. Amway is from Grand Rapids, Steelcase, Herman Miller. Anyway, so more conservative part of the world, quite religious. I grew up in a very traditional home environment, very religious home environment. And at the age of 16, I started to smoke weed, which my parents, when they found out, didn't appreciate too much. And so they sat me down one Sunday after church, and my dad looked at me and he's like, I haven't been this disappointed since my brother died in a car accident like 35 years before that, right? So they were clearly impacted by it. And maybe for some good reason, my mom's sister had been struggling with drug addiction for a lot of her life, and my mom sort of blames that for her not doing so well. So some logic to that, but also I was like, I had a really fun experience. This seems way safer than alcohol. I don't necessarily agree with you. Well, I mean, they grounded me regardless, so I didn't go out for like 6 weeks. And then once I kind of got back out in the world, I continued to smoke weed from time to time. And when I went away to college at the age of 19, I tried psychedelics for the first time at higher doses. Very impactful, had some beautiful and profound experiences with them. And that was highly influential on my path of deciding what I wanted to do. I was a sophomore, junior in college at the time. I didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated, what I was going to study. I actually changed what I was studying from biology to history. And then I focused on traveling right out of college. So I went and taught English in Turkey, built an online business soon after that while living in Thailand. And then in 2015, I was living in Budapest. And we were talking about how psychedelics were becoming more studied. There was more research. You had Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan, big podcasters who were starting to interview people about microdosing and psychedelic therapy. And the assumption was that, psychedelics would soon become a similar force to cannabis, but in a different way. And so I love history. So I just studied all the history of psychedelics. I tried to understand why they were illegal in the first place. I tried to understand how they had been used historically for thousands of years. And then from that came this third wave of psychedelics, which is, cultural accessibility through microdosing. So how can people use these in safe and effective ways, essentially?
Yeah, I know. I went to one Bulletproof conference and it seemed like everyone was microdosing. I think it was like 2018 or 19. Okay. I was like, wow, maybe
this is becoming a thing.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah, but I grew up in Southern California. I had my fair share of macrodosing, in high school and whatnot. Nice. But I have tried like LSD microdosing. I had this photo shoot and I was super exhausted. I'd paid like a fortune for this photo shoot. And the photographer was like, oh, hey, you should microdose. It's completely changed my life. I'm a completely different person.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, well, that's a pretty good sales job. So I tried it and I had an amazing day. I had like 3 hours of sleep for some issue and I had a great day. And then later that day, my brother, who I'd never met, called me on the phone. Wow. So I had a very strange day that day. But it was an interesting foray into microdosing, and I've known people. I have a really good friend of mine that started doing mushroom microdosing, completely changed him, came out of his shell, out of his depression, isolation, etc., completely changed his life. So I'm a huge fan of it, which is why I wanted to have you come on. So what do you think about like how the perception of psychedelics has, evolved culturally? And what are the kind of like common misunderstandings that people have? Because people, growing up and it's been illegal for a long time, people can have a negative, perception associated with mushrooms and LSD or microdosing.
Yeah, and more that's changing. When I started Third Wave in 2015, it was definitely an uphill climb. It's been a pretty uphill climb for the last 10 years, I would say. But we've, I think, reached a tipping point. 61% of Americans now support legal psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. The use of psychedelics quadrupled from 2019 to 2023. 4 times as many people took psychedelics in 2023 as 4 years prior. COVID was a huge indicator in that for mental health. And microdosing also played a very big role in that, because microdosing at home, especially during some of those more challenging mental health times, people were bored and they experimented, and it helped a lot of people through that. So that, I think, has changed the conversation rapidly. There's still some misconceptions about, are these addictive? Can they be physiologically harmful? What about, can people lose their mind? Can they have a psychotic break? So there's still some case for concern, like any drug or even medicine. The dose is the poison, if you will, which is why I've always loved the approach of microdosing, because it's more for the risk averse, the sort of beginners, the people who are just putting their toe in. You don't necessarily need to have these huge journey doses to still have positive beneficial outcomes from working with psychedelics. So I think, they are still Schedule 1. They are still federally illegal. And I would say that the DEA is much more focused on fentanyl, crystal meth, even cocaine, drugs that are harmful and addictive, particularly fentanyl right now. Mm-hmm. And there's a flourishing underground scene of psychedelics, and there's really very little to no prosecution of that. So that's a very exciting time, and more we're working to bring that above ground. Colorado and Oregon, in both of these states now, mushrooms are legal. California will look to pass a similar bill this year, and the FDA will likely approve MDMA, also known as ecstasy, to treat PTSD this year as well. So we could see by the end of this year, early next year, much broader accessibility. And my expectation is that by 2030, the majority of Americans will have legal legal and affordable access to working with psychedelics if they choose.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, whatever works, the psychedelics. So how do they work? I mean, they obviously seem to kind of flood your body with serotonin or dopamine, feel-good chemicals, and kind of bring you, elevate your mental state, open you up to a certain degree. Tell us a little bit more, maybe more eloquently, how they work.
When it comes to the benefits of psychedelics, there's two mechanisms of action to focus on, which are its impact on neuroplasticity and the prefrontal cortex, and also its impact on the amygdala, which is our fear response center. So what I often tell folks is, because of its impact on neuroplasticity, it helps us to learn new behaviors in a quicker way. We can accelerate behavioral change because of the neuroplastic effects of psychedelics, both microdosing and at high dosing. And we can have the courage to make those changes by its impact on the amygdala. The fear response, the fear center is downregulated, and it allows us to think in a much more courageous and expansive way. We often, and I also include myself in this, make decisions from a place of fear or constriction or scarcity. I mean, whatever term you want to put around it. You can measure that physiologically in terms of where is the sympathetic, or where are we with the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic versus parasympathetic. You can measure it spiritually. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. Emotionally, mentally, right? When the brain is more rigid, that leads to depression, addiction. So we're looking for expansion. We're looking for opening. We're looking for the capacity to create that space for new changes in our life. And that could be quitting smoking. That could be a new diet. That could be meditation practice. That could be difficult conversations with a partner or spouse. So relational work, even within a therapeutic container. There are lots of ways in which that plays out, and that depends on the person's intention. So this is where having a coach or a therapist, sometimes there are more therapeutic outcomes. I just want to feel good. I just want to feel normal. I just want to be back to myself. I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to be anxious. I struggle. I don't want to deal with this trauma anymore, or PTSD, whatever it is. And what I've focused on, and what I am much more well-versed in and enthusiastic about, is the effect when we're pretty good and we want to get way better. So what is its impact on creativity, leadership, performance, well-being? I like the sense of exploring all the dimensions of living. And I think psychedelics help me to be very creative about how I'm choosing to live, very intentional about how I'm choosing to live. I love autonomy and choice and just being able to create. And the beautiful thing about psychedelics is they teach both of those paradoxes. They teach both the paradox of how to surrender and how to let go and how to just be with things that come up, but also how to direct that energy towards a creative outcome that you think would be beneficial both for you and for the broader collective, right? So there has to be equal emphasis on both what's great for me and myself and my family, but also what's great for people at large and kind of the contribution that I'm making.
So for anyone listening that really wants to detox their body, go to heavymetalsquiz.com. I created a quiz for you. It only takes a couple of seconds. Based on some lifestyle questions, you can get your toxicity score and get a free video series that answers all of your frequently asked questions about how to detox your body. Check it out, heavymetalsquiz.com. Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting that, back in the day, say when I was in high school a long time ago, that back then they thought it was psychedelics were causing brain damage, or LSD. Certainly large doses, or
it can,
anything in large doses is going to be really problematic. But now they're finding that there's this neuroplasticity effect where you can change your brain in a positive way, in a quicker way. You said, changing behaviors more quickly. And that sounds great. Like I said, I've seen such positive benefits from friends and colleagues, and just personally how it can help to dramatically elevate your mood, bringing you out of that depressive state, and I could see where that could be so helpful. I spent most of my 20s depressed with mercury toxicity and other things going on. It'd be great to have had like a nice lift, because the microdosing wasn't, didn't really think of that at that time. But it'd be nice. Yeah, it wasn't, people aren't thinking.
Well, what helped you the most with that was that sauna. I mean, I've heard so much about saunas for detoxification. Was that part of it?
Oh
Or,
yeah,
I
for
mean, I'm sure
sure.
you've talked about this a ton on the podcast as well, like, because that's the focus of it is detoxing.
Yeah. Getting out
So
of the mercury toxicity. Yeah, infrared saunas, coffee enemas, targeted
how
supplements and
interesting.
things like that. Super helpful. And
And
nutrition.
psychedelics, ayahuasca, I think, also has that. I mean, I'd love to see research on that, and I can't speak at length about this necessarily, but I've worked myself a lot with ayahuasca, and I think it has some really interesting effects for detoxification. Combo as well. Combo, are you
Yes.
familiar with
Yeah,
combo?
I've heard
So
combo.
combo
Yeah, it definitely has some detox.
really cleans out the lymphatic system in particular. In
Yeah.
fact, I've been having some health issues the last 18 months, so I'm scheduling a combo
Oof.
thing because it is just a purgative. So it cleans you out. Ayahuasca does that as well, not to the same degree. But some of these psychedelic I mean, I find with psychedelics, they have a very detoxifying effect on the body and the mind. Like when people go in, and I mean, that's the intention behind dietas with ayahuasca, where a dieta is like for a month before, no pork, for a week before, and no other drugs, for 2 weeks before, no cannabis, for a week before, no sex. No, you just clean everything out for that space. So it can be very powerful in that way.
In what ways have you observed, say, like psychedelics and microdosing being really helpful for, leaders, CEOs, in their professional and personal lives?
I'll stick with the two principles that I talked about before: neuroplasticity and its impact on the amygdala. So the prefrontal cortex is related to decision making. It's related to strategy. It's related to big picture thinking, engineering, systems change. The prefrontal cortex allows us to think in abstract ways, more complex and complicated ways. It really is what differentiates the human species and our sort of quality of intelligence. I'll contextualize it versus maybe, monkeys or animals or plants or whatever it is. Specifically versus mammals. It's the prefrontal cortex. So psychedelics help with that. In fact, there's early theories that, the stoned ape theory, which is that psychedelics helped with the development of the prefrontal cortex initially, which helped us go from being apes to humans. So pretty far-fetched, but also quite interesting. So I think that's the first thing to focus on, because leaders and builders and creators, especially in today's world, there's a lot more uncertainty. There is a lot more change that is occurring rapidly as we sort of reach the end of time or the singularity. There's artificial intelligence, remote work, the internet. We're moving into a much more decentralized ecosystem, more local governance, I sense. So leaders need to be both highly adaptable, but also very attuned to their environment, to their surroundings, to their people, right? That attunement, that relational capacity is very helpful when building a team and an organization. So I think on the one hand, it's attunement. And on the other hand, I think it's vision, strategy, and how that gets communicated. So vision and team. And this isn't just me making up random stuff. I mean, I do that from time to time. But this is actually, it's backed by peer-reviewed research out of the Leadership Circle Profile. So the Leadership Circle Profile is a fantastic 360 assessment for leaders. It comes from the book Mastering Leadership. And they've done this with p-values, and they show what differentiates the great companies from the good companies is teamwork and vision as a CEO. So that's key to focus on. Then, of course, its impact on courage, its impact on the ability to make difficult decisions. The more our lives become complex, the more we strive to become successful, build something of value, do something important in the world. The more we have to navigate making decisions when we don't have everything at our disposal. So the sort of classic startup line is like, you need to know about 70% of the information to make a decision, and the rest is on gut. And I think psychedelics, when done in intentional and responsible ways with community and accountability, because there are a lot of people who drink a bunch of ayahuasca and they come up with all these crazy ideas, and then it just ends up derailing their life completely. Mm-hmm. And it felt courageous at the time, but there was no sense of discernment or accountability within a greater community. So I think that sense of support and community is essential, or unless people just get totally off the rocker and start doing ridiculous and wild things, and it actually is more destabilizing than helpful. So courage, I think, is important. It helps us to make difficult decisions as leaders. And sometimes we need that sort of kick in the pants to go and to make it happen. Then if So that's like with bigger doses too. Then we look at microdosing, and microdosing would do that just on a more day-to-day basis. So on a day-to-day, right? Because after we do a high dose, we have this, what opens up is something called a critical period of learning. And in that critical period of learning, it lasts for about 14 to 21 days, 2 to 3 weeks after a high dose psychedelic experience. What I tell folks is commit to one behavioral change, like meditate for those 21 days, or do breath work for those 21 days, or fast, intermittent fast for whatever it is. Just do one thing. And then you can microdose to elongate that critical learning period to about 45 days. That's my hypothesis. And so that's the time you need to build a habit and create a habit. And so the combination of that neuroplasticity, which makes the change easier, it's opening up that critical learning period with the courage to make a difficult or hard decision, like meditating, finally just doing it. That combination, I think, is sort of it's a superpower for client work. And that's why we have our training program with coaches and practitioners, because I'm like, the use of psychedelics in these two ways in particular could help a lot of creativity and impact to blossom in the world.
Yeah, and I could see where using psychedelics could help you if you are kind of stuck, if you feel kind of like you've hit a roadblock creatively, especially if you're, say, a writer, or you are lacking motivation to get up off your ass and start a project, or, we just go through periods where we're uninspired also. It just happens. We're super motivated and excited and inspired, and then other days we're just like, meh. Well, I feel like the psychedelics could really help you on those meh days where you could just get over that hill and get on with it already. I mean, there's something to like surrendering and listening to your body as well, but there's sometimes when you've got to make it happen. You got to get cracking, and I could see where taking psychedelics could really help foster that,
Yeah, it's helpful and this is, so just to go into this a little bit deeper for the audience, then, if we were to look at LSD versus psilocybin, because you had mentioned LSD, you had also mentioned mushrooms, right? What are the core differences between using those two substances to microdose? I look at dopamine and serotonin. So dopamine is the molecule of more. It's the focus, attention, motivation. Healthy dopamine levels are essential for getting work done and executing and focus and all these sorts of things. Serotonin is more tied to contentment, presence, kind of emotional well-being. Psilocybin is much more serotonergic. So there's a lot more serotonin, an impact on serotonin, the feel-good molecule. LSD is more dopaminergic. This isn't black and white. They're both active in both domains, but LSD is more dopaminergic. So a lot of individuals who have been on Vyvanse, Ritalin, Adderall, they take modafinil, maybe even certain racetams as a nootropic. They love LSD because it has the same level of stimulation without the sort of like constriction and jittery, overly stimulating. It's more playful. And those who have been on SSRIs tend to prefer microdosing with psilocybin because it has a greater impact on depression, but most importantly, catharsis, like allowing the body to open up and heal and release things. It's not as cognitive as LSD.
Yeah, and that's really good to know depending on what your deficiencies are. Maybe you have a lack of receptors or a lack of like production, or whatever your issue is genetically, or what is going on with you. I think people naturally reach for certain substances, cigarettes to get dopamine, or alcohol to get GABA, or whatever people are just kind of naturally deficient in. Knowing that can really help you to kind of choose like what type of microdosing would be, ideal for you. But you could also just try each one and see which one works better for you as well. I think it's just another quote medication that people can use to help make up for genetic deficiencies that they have, which is causing their depression, causing their anxiety, causing whatever's going on with them they don't like, whatever symptoms.
Yeah, and ideally, people then can get to a place where it's more supplementation. And that could be once a month. It might not even be like I do. One of my favorite brands is Neurohacker. They have something called the Qualia Senolytic, which is an anti-aging thing. I take it twice a month, back-to-back days, and it's really effective. So it could be for some people, this might be a once-a-month thing. It could be for some people, I take fish oil 5 times a week. I take creatine every day. So there may be ways to also think about it from a supplementation lens where it can help. Like you said, it can help. It's especially effective on what I found to be off days. Like there's something clinically significant that we're finding in the early research where if someone feels depressed, it's going to give them a bigger boost than if someone's already pretty good and they want to go further. This is with psilocybin in particular. I think the way to tweak that for people who are already pretty good is just take more.
Yeah.
That would be my perspective. Instead of just 10 micrograms of LSD, try 25.
Mm-hmm.
Or instead of 100 milligrams of psilocybin, maybe try 250 or 300. And then they'll get a little bit more of a boost because the dosage amount is higher.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and again, that could be once every 2 weeks or once every 3 weeks or once a month. This doesn't have to be a 3 times a week lifelong thing that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I can tell you from experience, when I did the microdose of LSD, I just felt like trash. Like I felt terrible that day.
Next day?
Yeah. Well, no. The day before I took it, the day, the lack of sleep, I felt bad mentally, physically exhausted. And then I took it. I had the best day of my life. I had an amazing photo shoot and I had a great time, and it just completely flipped the script on that day. And it was, incredibly memorable. So I can imagine taking it on like a regular basis, how positively impactful that would be. So you mentioned one brand. What other kind of, like, where do we source this? Where do we get it? How do we try it?
Oh, so Neurohacker is not a microdosing or psychedelic brand.
Okay, that was you were mentioning a nootropic, yeah.
Yeah, they do something called Qualia, which is a legal nootropic. Fantastic, highly recommend it. It's one of the best nootropics. I take the one without caffeine, and they have NAD+. They have other things. So just shout out to Neurohacker Collective. They make phenomenal products. When it comes to sourcing, it's difficult still because it's still illegal in most places. And even where it's legal, like Colorado and Oregon, it's not legal to just openly sell supplements like a cannabis dispensary model. That is not yet available. So what I tell folks is there's a great brand called MM1. That's capital M, 1. And just search for that MM1 mushrooms or MM1 microdosing. And that's a great starting place as a way to source psilocybin microdoses. Now, we also, on Third Wave, we have a sourcing guide where we say, okay, if you're interested in LSD, there are a lot of analogs that are technically legal for research that people can work with, but LSD is still quite difficult to get unless you know someone. Mushrooms, even on Third Wave, we have a grow kit. So if folks are like, I'd like to grow my own mushrooms, they can grow them in as little as 6 weeks. So that can be something to check out if folks want to do that. Otherwise, the key is just meeting more people, like meeting more community and more networks and going to a conference. We have a private community platform with Third Wave. So you can download an app and start to connect and meet with other people. All of these are really great and important ways just to start to build a network of folks. And then it becomes very easy to get really good medicine and drugs and get plugged into a great network of people who are doing this in an intentional and responsible way. And, some people, ayahuasca is legal in South America and Central America. There are mushroom retreats in Jamaica and the Netherlands. There's ketamine clinics all over. Ketamine is currently illegal. So there are lots. You can go to Oregon and do it legally at a high dose. There are lots of legal options at this point in time all over the world. And we have a directory of those options on Third Wave. So if you just go to our directory provider, you can find a bunch of spots in there.
Okay, great. So thethirdwave.co. Oh, so this might be kind of a stupid question, but do mushrooms grow on cow patties? Should they grow on
They
cow
can. So there's a certain type of strain called Psilocybe cubensis, which most commonly grows on cow patties. This goes back to the stoned apes theory that across the savannas of Africa, this type of magic mushroom grew. Our ancient ancestors ate these mushrooms and noticed that they would have these spiritual experiences, sure, but more importantly, would help with visual acuity. They could see better. They would have more energy. And those all grew out of cow pies. But you can grow mushrooms on wood chips. You can grow mushrooms on a certain, other types of substrates. There are mushrooms that are currently devouring oil in the Amazon. These are not psychedelic mushrooms necessarily, but mushrooms just eat and process things and digest dead things. And there are over 200 species of psilocybin mushrooms in the world today, and we're discovering more all the time.
I had no idea. I mean, my mom has a ranch here in Texas, and when I go walking and I see the cow patties and there's mushrooms growing on there, and I just think, are those medicinal? maybe I should pick a few and try them, but I'm like a little bit too scared.
Mushrooms are tricky because, it could be magic, and you could be in the emergency room and the liver failure
Yeah,
in
yeah.
6 hours. It's just hard to know unless you're with someone that knows. I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't mess with that.
Yeah, so you can find trusted sources and connections, correct, on your site.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
On the site, yeah, we have a sourcing guide. I think that's a great thing to check out. Like I said, we have the private community. If there are even, we also have this practitioner training program. So if there are coaches or practitioners or those who want to like weave this into their practice, we do a really great longer program that has a retreat component in Costa Rica. So we do a high dose journey. We do a microdose. We do something called the Sweat Lodge, Temescal, hot springs. It's a really beautiful experience. So that's also a great way to get professionally involved because a lot of folks are looking, as we talked about earlier, it's like this modality is really on the cutting edge. I think it can differentiate a great practitioner from a good practitioner if you learn how to work with skillfully, because so much of coaching work or therapeutic work is, I think it always comes back to behavioral change. It's like we heal the trauma or we heal the thing, whatever, to change our behaviors. So we're always looking at practically how does our life get better as a result of it. And psychedelics, time and time again, what I see is just psychedelics blow almost everything else out of the water. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very, very popular in Mexico, where I was living before, in the Mayan Riviera, in like Cancun and South Tulum, and that area. Lots of frog medicine, lots of combo, lots of temescal, like lots of ayahuasca, just lots
of beads. I'm sure there are lots of beads and hats as well, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm not sure what that is.
Just the Tulum beads.
Yeah,
the beads
the Tuluminatis.
Everyone has the Tuluminati hat. And like
yes, absolutely. Lots of that too, even more than frog medicine. But yeah, it's very, very popular there as well. Lots of my friends down there are doing that. I didn't try it. I was like, I think I'm good.
The frog medicine?
I never tried it. I don't know why. I think I just felt like I'd been there, done that. So I didn't feel like the need to do it. But I am interested in combo. I am interested in, or the bofu. Actually, my friend's really into the bofu. And
so combo's the frog, bufo's the toad.
Bufo, that's what I meant. Bufo.
There's
bofu.
A lot of,
it's like how Texans say it. Bofu.
Tofu. So the frog is the purgative. That's combo. There's no hallucinations. It's not psychedelic. You're just vomiting for hours.
Yeah.
Or maybe 30 minutes. Depends how long you go. The bufo is like white light transcendence. Yeah. That's the strongest psychedelic that you can do.
Yeah, it's on the planet.
I've been experimenting lately.
On the planet, correct? Yeah.
On the planet. And I've been experimenting lately with very low doses of that. Mm-hmm. So doing it in different titrated doses, because there's a synthetic version of 5. Bufo is the toad version. And it's tricky because it's starting to get handled by cartels. So what I usually tell people is do the synthetic. And with the synthetic, I'm using these pens to sort of do low doses that get gradually more and more intense, and that's another interesting way to approach it. So what I love about this emerging psychedelic ecosystem is a lot of people are experimenting with a lot of unique practices. Like the friends that I know who are doing this low dose 5-MeO, the Bufo, they're doing it with parts work, something called IFS, which has become quite prominent lately. So it's fun to look at. I love to meditate and do microdoses of LSD, or go hiking and do higher doses of LSD, or whatever it is. The combination of modalities is exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the Bufo is it's like transcendent. Like it's for,
at the very high doses.
Yeah, having like a very spiritual experience. But yeah, so where are you wanting to take Third Wave? Like, where are you going with this? What are your goals, and what are you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, so my big vision that I've started to share as of late, and whether I do this or someone else does this, I would just love to see this come to fruition. 6 months ago, I went on a 10-day silent Vipassana meditation retreat in Joshua Tree. So 10 days of silence, you meditate 10 hours a day. It's done it's this Goenka tradition. So Goenka was a Burmese businessman. He had a morphine addiction. He went all around the world to try to fix it. And 10 days of meditation in this style is what fixed it. Vipassana is the technique of meditation that the Buddha used to become enlightened. It's the pure form that he used to become enlightened. So the ethos or the story behind it is that you're practicing the form that the Buddha used 2,500 years ago. And this person, Goenka, ended up bringing it to the entire world. So there's 150 centers now. 100,000 people go through this program every year. It's completely donation on a donation basis. You can pay whatever you want. It's also on a purely volunteer basis. And each center is sovereign in its own way. It does its own fundraising, build its own. It's really community sort of grassroots oriented. I would love to see that, but for mushrooms. I'd love to see that, but for maybe ayahuasca. I'd love to see that, but for like generally plant medicines where these are more retreat centers. You could have some living quarters, but it's just for when you're running the retreats. Very low cost. Anyone can do it. They still have an application form. You have to, there's certain things you have to be mentally stable to a certain degree to participate. Implement a similar methodology that way and see how could we create accessible experiences for 100,000 people a year, right? So that would be my 20-year vision, right? Kind of real estate, land projects, nonprofit, community model where accessibility to psychedelics becomes widespread and it's on a volunteer donation basis.
Nice. Yeah.
I think more short term, I'm especially in the next 5 years, I'm very focused on training practitioners and how to work with psychedelics, focusing on psilocybin in particular, and low doses of psychedelics in combination or conjunction with other modalities. So I love to train, I love to teach. That'll be sort of my personal focus. Impacting more and more leaders and builders, so more from an executive level and business development level, personally, but I'll train other practitioners in, life, relationships, clinical, whatever it is, kind of all the dimensions of that. And then my big problem that I think needs to be solved for the broader ecosystem is vetted centers that people can go to. So safe access, because there are a lot of newbies that are coming into the space that don't know up from down. They don't know left from right. They don't know this medicine from this medicine. So they just kind of go to whatever lands on their plate. Many of those experiences are good. Some of those experiences are great. And some of those experiences are not great. They could even be traumatizing. So, and that could be with individual practitioners, or it could be in group settings at retreats or even in clinics. So my intention is how do we build like a vetted ecosystem of providers, practitioners, and centers that you can go to where you know that you're going to get really great treatment or really great care. These are people that you can trust, because that will create a very strong and healthy ecosystem, because there will be a lot of integrity and a sense of transparency and ethics. So I think that for me is like generally what I want to put my entrepreneurial energy behind. And there's the way that I look at sort of what I'm creating is a psychedelic archipelago. So I've started 3 companies in the space. Actually, no, 4, but 1 is not fully public yet, but 3 are very public, and a 4th. And then I've started a nonprofit, co-founded a nonprofit called the Microdosing Collective, where we're looking to legalize microdosing. It's a 501c3 in California. And so my next big thing I want to do is this nonprofit land project and start to figure out that. But I love this work. I kind of feel like I found what I want to do for the rest of my life, which makes it very fun and playful and exciting. And, my biggest reminder to myself is like, you have a lot of time and no rush. I love to create and I love to move and I love to build things, but sometimes I get over my skis. And so every now and then I just got to slow down.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of, opportunity for that in Mexico. I think there's a lot of people going there for that. There's a lot of freedom there as well around that, but probably, will be legalized in the United States.
Mexico, Costa Rica, Canada, Portugal, the Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, I think will soon be. Asia's a little less open to it. Thailand, there may be some feasibility there soon. Thailand could be a potential. And even there's, now psychedelic conferences in Dubai.
Interesting. That's interesting.
And Saudi Arabia is getting more and
strict.
more interested.
They're typically very.
So the Sovereign Wealth Fund is starting to. The Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia is looking to invest in psychedelics.
That's fairly interesting, because they're so closed about marijuana and other drugs. It's, literally like a capital offense.
And it's the mental health outcomes. It's got to be just because that's the pure, like what they're interested in biotech and drug development for it, basically.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Patenting.
Well, very interesting. I had no idea. Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show And again, why don't you tell us where we can find you, learn more about it, learn how to microdose, and try this out for ourselves.
So go to thethirdwave.co. Everything you need is on there. Folks like books. I wrote a book called Mastering Microdosing. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Paul Austin 3W, like Third Wave. I do some one-to-one work, guidance, experiential work with psychedelics, support with microdosing. And like I mentioned, we also have the practitioner training program. There are coaches or practitioners who are interested in incorporating this in. What would be a good code, Wendy, do you think that would be easy to remember?
Oh, just Wendy.
For folks?
Wendy.
Just Wendy?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a code. If you just put in Wendy for $500, that'll be $500 off the practitioner training. So you can find all that on thethirdwave.co. My name as well, Paul Austin 3W on Twitter and Instagram, and my book, Mastering Microdosing. This is fun. It was a great kind of conversation, and I'm glad we got to do it. So thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, that's great. And I have there's lots of practitioners that listen to this, lots of physicians and lots of health practitioners, alternative health practitioners. That'll be really helpful. So thank you for that $500 off the training. I'm sure there'll be lots of people interested in that. And I've had a few people on the show talk about, ketamine assisted therapy. And I just find this really, really, really interesting. As someone myself who went to therapy for 10 years, this seems to be something that would be far more impactful and move the needle so much faster for people dealing with depression or anxiety or other, issues related to that. Or if you just have a meh day, you need a little push. So Paul, thanks for coming on. And so everyone, I'm Dr. Wendy Myers. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Myers Detox podcast, where I have experts from around the world coming on and, helping you to meet your health goals, because you deserve to feel good. So thanks for tuning in.
The Myers Detox podcast is created and hosted by Wendy Myers. This podcast is for information purposes only. Statements and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Wendy Myers and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.